If you've ever poured your heart and soul into something, a project, a passion, a person, only to have it treated like dust, then you might understand a fraction of what I'm about to tell you. My name is Edgar. I'm 76 years old, and for the last 10 of those years I've been keeping a secret. A secret made of mahogany, brass, and meticulously cut gears. It's a story about two clocks, but it's also a story about two children, a lifetime of invisible pain, and the day the silence finally broke. Before we get into the thick of it, I'd appreciate it if you'd take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps more than you know, and it makes sure these stories find the people who need to hear them. My workshop smells of sawdust and varnish, a scent that's been my constant companion for over 50 years. It's the smell of creation, of taking a rough piece of timber and finding the beauty locked inside it. For most of my life, I believed you could do the same with people, that if you were patient enough and kind enough and you polished them with love, their best selves would eventually shine through. I was wrong. Some wood is just warped from the start, and no amount of sanding can make it straight. My daughter Sharon is a piece of work I could never quite figure out. From the moment she had her own children, it was like a switch was flipped inside her. She had two, a son and a daughter. Her son Leo was born with the sun shining on him. He was loud, athletic, and charming, in that easy way some people are. He could trip, fall flat on his face, and somehow make it look like a new dance move. People, especially Sharon, were captivated by him. He was her golden boy, the reflection of everything she wanted to be. Then there was Maya, my granddaughter. Maya was born during a quiet rainfall. She was thoughtful, observant, and had a mind like a beautiful, intricate puzzle. Where Leo would fill a room with noise, Maya would fill it with a presence. She didn't demand attention, she earned it, if you were wise enough to give it. But in her own home, she was like a ghost, a piece of furniture. Sharon loved her, I suppose, in the way one loves a concept, the concept of a daughter. But she adored Leo. She saw him. She heard him. Maya, she simply overlooked. For years it was a slow, grinding heartbreak. I'd watch it happen at every family gathering, every holiday. For Leo's 10th birthday, he got a top-of-the-line bicycle and a party with a bouncy castle that took up their entire backyard. For Maya's 10th birthday, 6 months later, she got a bookstore gift card and a small cake after dinner because Sharon was just too exhausted from planning Leo's big bash. When I'd bring a special gift for Maya, something I knew she'd love, like a rare set of watercolor paints, Sharon would say, "Oh, Dad, you shouldn't have. We don't have room for more clutter." But when Leo wanted a drum set that shook the entire house, a room was magically cleared out. I tried to talk to Sharon about it, gently at first. I'd say things like, "Maya got straight A's again. Isn't that wonderful?" And Sharon would be looking over my shoulder, watching Leo kick a soccer ball, and she'd reply with a distracted, that's nice. Leo, honey, bend your knees more." The dismissal was so casual, so complete, it was like a slap in the face. It told me my words were meaningless, my opinion worthless. The final straw, the one that broke a dam of resentment I didn't even know was at its breaking point, happened about a year before the party. I had put aside a few $1,000s. I'd told Sharon it was specifically for Maya to attend a summer program at a prestigious art school. It was a big deal for her, a chance to be with other kids who saw the world the way she did. I gave the money to Sharon to handle the registration. A month later, I asked Maya how excited she was. She just looked at her shoes and mumbled, "Mom said it was too expensive this year." My blood ran cold. I called Sharon immediately. "What happened to the art camp money?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. "Oh, that," she said, her tone breezy and dismissive. "Something came up. Leo's travel team made it to the regionals, and the expenses were just astronomical. Dad, you understand, it was for the family. It was for Maya," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "I gave you that money for your daughter." "And I used it for my son," she retorted, a sharp edge to her voice now. "It's the same family. Leo is the one with the real chance of getting a scholarship. It's an investment in his future. Maya's little hobby can wait." "You're being so dramatic." She hung up. Just like that. An investment. That's what it was. Leo was a blue chip stock, and Maya was a penny stock not worth the gamble. And in that moment, I realized my quiet protests, my gentle reminders, they were like trying to put out a forest fire with a water pistol. Sharon didn't just favor Leo, she actively devalued Maya. It was a conscious choice. And my complicit silence, my attempt to keep the pieces for all those years, had just made me a party to the crime. It wasn't about revenge, not yet, but it was about justice, a justice that would be slow, patient, and built of wood and time. So I went back to my workshop. I looked at the two identical grandfather clocks standing side by side against the far wall. They were nearly finished. 10 years of my life, my heart, my grief for my late wife Helen, poured into them. They were magnificent, towering over me, at nearly 8 feet tall, carved from the same stock of ribbon mahogany, with grains that flowed like water. The bonnets were hand-carved, with the same scrolling fretwork. The columns were fluted, with the same precision. The brass dials were engraved with the same Roman numerals. They were to any eye perfectly identical, but they were not. One of them held a secret, and as I ran my hand over the smooth, cool finish of Maya's clock, I knew. The time for quiet work was almost over. The time for a loud and clear statement was about to begin. The party was just the stage I needed. The day of Leo's high school graduation party arrived like a drum roll. Sharon's backyard was a spectacle of success. White tents, catered food, a banner that screamed, "Congratulations, Leo. The world is yours," in garish gold letters. Friends and neighbors swarmed around Leo, who was holding court like a young prince, accepting congratulations with an easy practiced charm. Sharon was a blur of motion, her smile stretched so wide it looked painful, her hand always on Leo's shoulder, anchoring herself to his glow. I had arranged for movers to bring the clocks earlier that day. They stood near the patio, draped in heavy moving blankets, two silent, imposing monoliths amidst the celebration. People would drift by, their curiosity piqued. "What's under there, Edgar?" they'd ask, and I'd just smile and say, "A matter of time." Maya was there, of course. She was tucked into a corner of the patio, sketching in her notebook, a small island of quiet in an ocean of noise. She looked beautiful, her thoughtful expression a stark contrast to the performative joy around her. Sharon hadn't even looked her way once. I went over and sat with her. "Grandpa," she said, her eyes lighting up for the first time. "I love your tie, and I love that you noticed," I said, squeezing her hand. "Are you doing all right?" She gave a small shrug. "It's Leo's day. I'm just trying to stay out of the way." Those words, "stay out of the way," they twisted a knife in my gut that had been there for years. This brilliant, wonderful girl had been taught that her very existence was an inconvenience. My resolve, which had been hardening for a decade, became pure steel. Finally, the moment came. Sharon, holding a glass of champagne, clinked a fork against it. The crowd quieted down. She gave a gushing speech about her perfect son, his achievements, his bright future. It was nauseatingly effusive. When she finished, everyone applauded, and Leo beamed. Then Sharon turned to me. "And now I think my father Edgar has a little something he'd like to present to the graduate." All eyes were on me. This was it. I stood up, my old bones feeling stronger than they had in years. I walked over to the two shrouded giants. "Thank you, Sharon," I began, my voice carrying across the yard. "Leo, your grandmother Helen and I always believed in the importance of marking time, of celebrating milestones. She would have been so proud of you today." I paused, letting that sink in. I could feel Sharon preening. I walked to the first clock, and with a flourish, pulled the blanket away. A collective gasp went through the crowd. The mahogany gleamed in the afternoon sun, the brass pendulum catching the light. It was, even I had to admit, a masterpiece. "For the last 10 years, I said, my voice resonating with the weight of that decade, "I have been working on these. Leo, on the occasion of your graduation, a milestone marking your entry into the world of men, I present this to you. May it remind you that time is the most valuable thing you have. Use it wisely. Leo's friends hooted and clapped. He came over, gave the clock a cursory pat and said, "Whoa, Grandpa, that's huge." "Thanks." He was already turning back to his friends, the magnificent gift already becoming part of the background scenery. That was fine. It served its purpose. It was the setup. Then I turned to the second clock. The crowd was murmuring, expecting a similar speech. I pulled the second blanket off, revealing its identical twin. The silence that fell was different this time. It was confusion. I looked directly at Maya, who was watching me with wide, questioning eyes. I beckoned her to come forward. She hesitated, looking at her mother, who was now frowning, a flicker of irritation crossing her face. "Maya, come here," I said gently. She slowly walked toward me, stepping out of the shadows and into the center of everyone's attention. "As I said, I built 2 clocks," I announced to the crowd, my gaze sweeping over them before landing back on Maya. "They look the same, they are made from the same wood, to the same design, but they are not. One is a gift, marking a moment in time. The other," I paused, letting the drama build. "The other is a reward." I reached toward the base of Maya's clock, to a spot that looked like a seamless part of the carved trim. I pressed a tiny hidden release I had designed. There was a soft click, and a section of the base panel swung inward, revealing a hollow compartment. The crowd leaned in, their curiosity palpable. Sharon took a step forward, her face a mask of disbelief and dawning anger. Inside the compartment lay 2 thick legal-sized envelopes. I took them out and held them up. "This clock," I said, my voice clear and steady, "is also for my granddaughter Maya. But it is not a graduation gift. She still has that to look forward to." I smiled at her. "This is a reward. A reward for the years of quiet brilliance, for the unseen effort, for the grace and thoughtfulness that is too often overlooked in a world that only values the loudest voice in the room." I handed the envelopes to Maya. Her hands were trembling as she took them. "Go on, open them," I urged. With shaking fingers, she opened the first one. She pulled out a sheaf of papers, and her eyes went wide. She looked at me, her mouth agape. "What is it?" Sharon snapped, her voice cutting through the hushed awe of the crowd. "Dad, what have you done?" I ignored her. "Read what it says at the top, sweetheart." I told Maya. Her voice was a whisper, but in the dead silence it carried. "Quit claim deed." "And the property address?" I prompted. 114 Oak Street, she read, her voice cracking. It was a duplex I owned downtown, a valuable rental property. Sharon's face went from red to a ghostly white. "You didn't." "Open the other one, Maya," I said, my eyes locked on my daughter's. Maya opened the second envelope. It was another deed. 32 Elm Avenue, she breathed. Another rental property, a small house near the university. I turned back to the stunned crowd, my voice ringing with a decade of pent-up conviction. These properties, with a combined net income of over $6,000 a month, are now legally hers. They are not a gift. They are the first payment on a debt owed. A reward for the quiet, steadfast soul who never asked for a thing but deserved everything. The silence was absolute. You could have heard a feather drop on the manicured lawn. Then I heard a single choked sob. It was Maya. Tears were streaming down her face, but she was smiling. A real, radiant smile that outshone every bit of Leo's practiced charm. That's when the storm broke. "How could you?" Sharon's voice was a low, vicious hiss. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. "How could you do this to me? To us? Today? You've humiliated this family. You've ruined Leo's day." "No, Sharon," I said, pulling my arm free and looking at her with a coldness that surprised even me. "I haven't ruined anything. I've just balanced the books." That moment at the party was just the beginning. The fallout was immediate and ugly. As soon as I uttered the words balance the books, Sharon's face contorted into a mask of pure fury. She tried to keep her voice low, for the sake of the dozens of guests still frozen on her lawn. But her rage was a physical thing, a wave of heat that washed over me. "You senile old fool," she hissed, her voice trembling. "This is a joke, right? A sick, twisted joke to get attention. Does it feel like a joke?" I asked calmly, gesturing to the deeds in Maya's hands. Maya was still standing there, shell-shocked, looking from the papers to my face and back again, as if trying to solve an impossible equation. Leo had finally peeled himself away from his friends and was standing beside his mother, a look of utter bewilderment on his face. "Grandpa, what's going on?" he asked. "Why does Maya get houses? Is this my gift too?" The sheer, unadulterated ignorance of his question was almost comical. He wasn't malicious. He was just a product of his environment, a boy who had never once had to consider that the world didn't revolve around him. "No, Leo," I said, my voice softening slightly when I looked at him. "This isn't about you. For once, that was a mistake." The implication that things were ever about anyone else sent Sharon over the edge. "Get out," she seethed. "Get out of my house, and take your ridiculous furniture with you." I simply nodded. "As you wish." I turned to Maya. "Let's go. We'll arrange for the clock to be delivered to a safer location." I put my arm around her trembling shoulders and gently guided her away from the tableau of her mother's fury and her brother's confusion. As we walked toward the front of the house, a few of the guests, old friends of the family, looked at me with a mixture of shock and something else, a flicker of understanding, of dawning respect. They had seen it too, all these years. They'd just been too polite to say anything. The days that followed were a siege of digital aggression. My phone became a weapon aimed directly at my peace of mind. Sharon left a dozen voicemails, each one more vitriolic than the last. They ranged from screaming tirades about my selfishness and cruelty to tearful, manipulative pleas about how I was tearing the family apart. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" one message shrieked. "You've pitted my children against each other." Maya is walking around in a daze, and Leo is confused and hurt. "You did this." It was a masterclass in deflection. In her mind, the problem wasn't her 20 years of blatant favoritism. It was my one afternoon of blatant truth-telling. The texts were worse, rapid-fire bursts of guilt and accusation. Asterisk, "Your wife would be ashamed of you. You've always been a bitter, controlling man. Leo is heartbroken. He looked up to you." I didn't respond to any of it. I just sat in my quiet house, the silence a welcome balm after the party's storm. And in that quiet, the memories came flooding back, not as vague feelings, but as sharp, painful Polaroids. I let them come. I needed to remember why I had done this. I remembered Leo's 5th birthday. I had spent 2 months in my workshop building him a magnificent wooden rocking horse with a real horsehair tail. I was so proud of it. He rode it for 5 minutes before casting it aside for a noisy plastic spaceship his other grandparents had bought. 2 years later, I found the horse in the back of their garage, one of its rockers broken, covered in mildew. For Maya's 5th birthday, I had made her a delicate dollhouse, a perfect replica of their own home. She had played with it for hours every single day, creating little stories, tending to it like a precious treasure. Sharon had complained it took up too much space, and tried to convince her to give it to a younger cousin. I remembered the parent-teacher conferences. Sharon would move heaven and earth to attend Leo's, crowing about his natural leadership skills when a teacher praised him, and making excuses about boyish energies when they pointed out he was disruptive. For Maya's conferences, she always had a work emergency. I was the one who went. I was the one who heard Mrs. Davison in the 4th grade say, "Maya has a gift. Her writing is insightful beyond her years. She's an old soul." When I relayed this to Sharon, she just nodded absently, while sorting through Leo's soccer jerseys. The pain of these memories was sharp, But it was the memory of my wife, Helen, that truly solidified my resolve. She had been gone for 10 years now, taken by a cancer that was as relentless as it was swift. In her final weeks, her body was frail, but her mind was sharp as a tack. She saw everything. One afternoon, as I sat by her bedside holding her hand, she had turned to me, her eyes clear and intense. "Edgar," she'd whispered, her voice a dry rasp, "you have to promise me something." "Anything, my love," I'd said, my throat tight with grief. "Look after Maya," she said. "Don't let Sharon snuff out her light. It's a special light, Edgar. Quiet, but special. Sharon, she only sees the bright, shiny things. She doesn't know how to value the deep things. You have to be her champion. Promise me." A tear had escaped my eye and rolled down my cheek. "I promise, Helen. I promise." For 10 years, I thought I was keeping that promise by being a steady presence, by offering quiet support, by buying the art supplies and attending the teacher conferences. But after the incident with the art camp money, I finally understood. I hadn't been a champion. I had been a bystander. I was propping up a corrupt system, not fighting it. Helen didn't ask me to just watch over Maya. She asked me to look after her, to protect her. And the only way to protect her from a predator like Sharon's casual cruelty was to give her something Sharon couldn't touch: independence. That was the true catalyst, the memory of that promise. I stood up, walked over to my phone, and deleted all of Sharon's messages without listening to the rest. I blocked her number. The siege was over. The war for Maya's future had just begun. My breakdown, if you could call it that, was a quiet affair. There was no weeping or gnashing of teeth. It was an internal collapse, a moment of profound loneliness in my workshop, surrounded by the ghosts of projects past. I looked at the empty space where the 2 clocks had stood, and for a moment I felt a terrible pang of regret. Not for what I did, but for the fact that it had been necessary. A father shouldn't have to build a fortress to protect his granddaughter from her own mother. The anger and the grief and the righteousness all churned inside me until they settled into something new, something hard and clear and cold. Resolve. This wasn't a single battle. It was a campaign, and it had been meticulously planned for a decade. My plan didn't begin with anger. It began with foresight. Shortly after Helen died, and I made her that promise, I took a hard look at my life and my finances. I was a successful woodworker, and I'd invested wisely. I had my pension, my savings, and 2 rental properties I'd bought back in the 80s when the market was low. They were my nest egg, a quiet source of income that I never spoke about with Sharon. She just assumed my pension was generous. For years, the rent checks came in, I paid the taxes and maintenance, and the profits went into a separate account, accumulating like dust in a forgotten corner. After that conversation with Helen, that account was no longer just a nest egg. It became the Amaya Fund. It was the ammunition I was stockpiling for a war I hoped I'd never have to fight. At the same time, I began the clocks. It felt right. Woodworking is a slow, deliberate process. You can't rush it. You have to respect the material, understand its grain, its strengths, its weaknesses. You have to be patient. It was the perfect metaphor for what I needed to do for Maya. I would build her future slowly, patiently, and make it so strong and beautiful that no one could ever deny its value. I chose ribbon mahogany, not just for its beauty, but for its interlocking grain, which makes it incredibly strong and stable. A wood that doesn't warp easily. The design was a classic English grandfather clock, a symbol of permanence and legacy. For 10 years, that project was my therapy. Every cut of the sole, every pass of the plane, every layer of hand-rubbed varnish was a meditation on my promise to Helen. I channeled all my frustration with Sharon, all my love for Maya, into the work. The scent of the wood, the hum of the lathe, the quiet scratch of sandpaper, that was my sanctuary. While the clocks took shape, I started laying the legal groundwork, and for that I needed my oldest and dearest friend, Arthur Gentry. Arthur was a retired estate lawyer, a man with a mind as sharp as a chisel and a heart as soft as well-worn leather. He was the only person on earth, besides Helen, who I had ever confided in about the situation with Sharon. I remember meeting him for our weekly coffee at a small diner a few years into the project. The clocks were just framed out skeletons in my shop at that point. You look tired, Edgar, Arthur said, peering at me over his spectacles. I'm building something, I told him. It's taking a lot out of me. A new commission? No, I said, stirring my coffee. Something personal. Arthur, I need some legal advice, off the record. He leaned forward, his expression serious. Yes, I'm all ears. I laid it all out for him. The favoritism, the casual cruelty, the devaluing of Maya. I told him about the rental properties and my idea to give them to her one day. Arthur listened without interrupting, his brow furrowed in concentration. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "It's a noble idea, Edgar. But a gift of that magnitude, given your family dynamic, Sharon will fight it. She'll claim you're not of sound mind. She'll allege undue influence, that Maya somehow manipulated you." "Maya wouldn't manipulate a fly," I scoffed. "I know that. You know that. But a court doesn't. We have to make this ironclad. We have to build a legal fortress around Maya, just like you're building that clock." That phrase stuck with me. A legal fortress. Over the next few years, Arthur became my co-conspirator. Oh, yes. He guided me through the complexities of property law with a surgeon's precision. He advised against a simple quit-claim deed at first. Too easy to challenge, he'd said. Instead, he helped me set up a revocable living trust. It was a brilliant move. I would be the trustee, maintaining full control of the properties for as long as I lived, or until I decided otherwise. Maya would be named the sole beneficiary. "This does two things," Arthur explained, tapping his pen on the document. "First, it keeps the properties out of probate when you pass, so they go directly to her, no questions asked. Second, and more importantly for our purposes, it creates a clear legal record of your intent, established years in advance. When the time comes, you won't just be signing over a deed on a whim. You'll be executing a long-established trust. It makes any claim of sudden incompetence or undue influence look ridiculous. We even built in layers of protection. Arthur had me get a full cognitive assessment from my doctor and had it notarized and filed with the trust documents. We did it every 2 years. He had me write a detailed letter, a letter of intent, explaining exactly why I was establishing the trust and why Maya was the sole beneficiary. I wrote about Helen's wish, about Maya's quiet brilliance, about my desire to provide her with the security her own mother denied her. We had that letter notarized too. Each step was another brick in the fortress. The hidden panel in the clock was my idea. It was the master woodworker's final touch, a secret kept in plain sight. I spent a month perfecting the mechanism. It used a series of small internal wooden pins and a pressure release system. You had to press on 2 seemingly random spots on the carved molding simultaneously for the panel to click open. It was my little bit of theatricality, a way to make the reveal unforgettable. The final step was to prepare the quitclaim deeds. Arthur advised we keep the properties in the trust until the very last moment. "The day you decide to do this," he said, "you will sign these deeds, transferring the properties from the Edgar Thorne Revocable Trust to Maya Thorne, an individual. We'll have a notary with us. Once you hand those signed, notarized deeds to her, it's done. It's an immediate, irrevocable transfer. Sharon can scream and holler all she wants, but she'll be screaming at a brick wall." This secret plan was my solace. When Sharon would call to boast about some minor achievement of Leo's, while completely ignoring a major one of Maya's, I would retreat to my workshop. I'd look at the clock, run my hand over the secret panel, and feel a sense of calm. I wasn't just building a clock. I was building a future. I was keeping my promise. Sharon had no idea. She, like everyone else, saw an old man pottering around in his workshop, a widower filling his lonely hours with a hobby. She mistook my patience for passivity, my silence for weakness. She never once considered that the quiet, thoughtful man she so easily dismissed could be capable of such a long, intricate, and devastatingly effective plan. She saw a quiet old woodworker. She should have seen a patient, methodical architect of her downfall. The first move after the party wasn't a loud declaration. It was a profound and unnerving silence. I didn't answer Sharon's calls. I didn't reply to her vitriolic texts. I let her scream into the digital void. In a family dynamic like ours, where she was used to me being the ever-present placating force, my silence was the most aggressive move I could have made. It was a withdrawal of the very foundation she'd built her world upon, my unconditional, and as she was discovering, unreciprocated, support. The panic from her end was palpable, even through the silence. The tone of her voicemails shifted over the course of a week. The initial rage, "You oak, how dare you," morphed into manipulative pleading, "You Teo, they're tearing this family apart." That was followed by threats. "Dario, I'm talking to a lawyer, Dad. You can't just give away assets like that." And finally the first cracks of real fear appeared. "You maid Tut, please call me. We need to talk about the house taxes." Ah, yes, the house taxes. For the last 15 years, I had quietly paid the annual property tax bill on Sharon's oversized suburban home. It started when her husband, a man with more charm than ambition, was between jobs. It was meant to be a temporary help, but like so many things with Sharon, my temporary help became a permanent expectation. It was a significant amount, nearly $10,000 a year. It was never discussed. The bill would come, she would mention it with a sigh, and I would simply write a check. She saw it as her due. I saw it as another way of keeping the peace, of ensuring I had access to my grandchildren, another brick in the wall of my own prison. After a week of her unanswered messages, I made my second move. It was a simple letter, not from me, but from Arthur Gentry, attorney at law. It was short, professional, and utterly devastating. It stated, in no uncertain terms, that due to my reassessment of my financial commitments, the annual gift to cover the property taxes on her residence would no longer be forthcoming. It wished her the best in managing her future financial obligations. That letter was a torpedo in the side of her very comfortable life. She and her husband lived right up to the edge of their means, funding a lifestyle that was all about appearances, the new cars, the expensive vacations for Leo, the country club membership. My $10,000 subsidy was the invisible scaffolding holding the whole facade up. I had just kicked it out from under them. The reaction was immediate. A call, not from Sharon, but from Leo. He sounded uncomfortable, clearly a pawn in his mother's game. "Grandpa," he began, his voice hesitant, "Mom's really upset about some letter from a lawyer." "I imagine she is," I said, my tone neutral. "She said you're not going to pay for the house stuff anymore, and that you're giving the 2 rental houses to Maya. I don't get it. Why are you being so weird about money all of a sudden?" The innocence of it was galling. "Leo," I said, and for the first time I let a bit of the coldness I felt seep into my voice. "For your entire life, your mother has made choices. She chose to invest everything, her time, her energy, her money, even my money, in you. She chose to ignore your sister. This isn't about me being weird with money. This is about the consequences of those choices. The properties I gave Maya were bought and paid for by me with my own labor long before you were born. The money I used to pay your mother's taxes was also from my own labor. I have simply decided to redirect my resources. This is not a negotiation." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. I could hear Sharon whispering furiously in the background. "What's he saying? Put it on speaker." "He's saying no," Leo mumbled. "And then look, Grandpa. Mom just wants to know why you're doing this to us." "I'm not doing anything to you, Leo. I am doing something for Maya. There is a profound difference, and it's a difference your mother has never been willing to understand. Goodbye, Leo." I hung up before he could respond. Meanwhile, my conversations with Maya were the complete opposite. She called me the day after the party, her voice small and overwhelmed. "Grandpa, I'm at my friend's house. I couldn't go home. She's like a different person." "She's not a different person, sweetheart," I told her gently. She's the same person just without the mask. Are you okay? I don't know what I am, she whispered, and I could hear her start to cry. The deeds, are they real? Is it really real? As real as the clocks, I assured her, and it's all yours. No one can take it from you. It's the start of your future, Maya. A future that you get to design. We met a few days later, just the two of us, at the same diner where I had first conspired with Arthur. She looked exhausted, but there was a new light in her eyes, a flicker of bewildered hope. She clutched the envelopes with the deeds in them like they were a life raft. I don't even know what to do, Grandpa, she said. I've never even paid a bill before. I know, I said, smiling. And that's the beautiful part. You get to learn. We'll learn together. I'll help you. We'll talk to the tenants. We'll set up a bank account for the rental income. We'll find you a good accountant. This isn't a burden, Maya. It's a set of tools. You finally have your own tools to build whatever life you want. She looked down at the table, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. All these years, she said, her voice thick with emotion, I thought it was me. I thought there was something wrong with me, that I wasn't enough, not funny enough, not outgoing enough, not like Leo. I reached across the table and took her hand. Oh, my dear girl, I said, my own voice catching. You were always more than enough. Some people are just too blind to see it, but their blindness doesn't change what's real. You are brilliant, and you are worthy. I just provided the frame. The masterpiece was already there. That conversation was the first real payment on the debt I felt I owed her. Not just for my daughter's neglect, but for my own silence. The money, the properties, they were just the mechanism. The real takeover was this, a quiet girl, who had been made to feel like a ghost in her own family, was finally starting to believe she had a right to take up space in the world. And I, her grandfather, was no longer a silent bystander. I was her partner. The power shift didn't happen like an earthquake. It was more like a change in the tide, slow, almost imperceptible at first, but relentless and irreversible. The public nature of my announcement at the party had sent ripples through our community. People talk, and for the first time the narrative wasn't one that Sharon could control. My phone started ringing, but it wasn't just my angry daughter anymore. It was my cousin Beatrice, from out of state. Edgar, I heard what happened, she said, her voice conspirator. And I have to say, it's about damn time someone put Sharon in her place. We've all seen it for years. At every Christmas, it was Leo this and Leo that, while that sweet Maya just faded into the wallpaper. Good for you. An old neighbor, whose kids had grown up with Sharon's, called under the guise of asking about my garden. After a few minutes of pleasantries, he lowered his voice. Listen, Edgar, I know it's none of my business, but what you did for Maya, that was a good thing. A really good thing. My wife and I always felt so sorry for that little girl. Each call was another small validation, another voice confirming that I wasn't a senile old fool or a bitter man. I was just the first person to say out loud what everyone else had been whispering for 2 decades. The carefully constructed facade of Sharon's perfect family was beginning to crumble, not because of a wrecking ball but because the truth was seeping into the foundations. Sharon, of course, doubled down. When she realized that shaming me and cutting me off wasn't working, she escalated her tactics. She launched a desperate counter-offensive. One afternoon, there was a sharp, insistent knock on my door. I looked through the peephole and saw Sharon and her husband Frank standing on my porch, their faces grim. I didn't open the door. Dad, I know you're in there, she shouted, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Open this door. We need to talk. I remained silent, standing we still in my front hall. Don't make me call the police for a wellness check, Dad. I will. I'll tell them you're not answering, and I think you've fallen. It was a classic Sharon move, a threat wrapped in a veneer of concern. But I had prepared for this with Arthur. I picked up my phone and called the local police precinct's non-emergency line. I calmly explained that I was fine, that my daughter was on my porch creating a disturbance, and that if they received a call for a wellness check at my address, it was likely a form of harassment. The dispatcher was surprisingly understanding. After another 10 minutes of shouting and banging, they gave up and left. The desperation was rolling off them in waves. Frank, who usually just stayed in the background, had looked as panicked as Sharon. The loss of the $10,000 tax subsidy was clearly a bigger blow than even I had imagined. Their next move was even more predictable and more pathetic. I received a letter from a law firm I'd never heard of. It was full of legal jargon, but the gist was clear. They were exploring the possibility of challenging the property transfer on the grounds of my diminished mental capacity and susceptibility to undue influence. They were formally requesting access to my medical records and a court-ordered psychiatric evaluation. I laughed. I actually sat in my armchair and laughed out loud. They had walked right into the trap Arthur and I had so carefully laid. I simply forwarded the letter to Arthur, who responded to them with a package. It contained my notarized cognitive assessment from 6 months prior, declaring me of exceptionally sound mind and memory. My notarized letter of intent from 5 years prior, which explicitly detailed my long-term plan for Maya, and a polite but firm note warning them against pursuing a frivolous and defamatory legal action. We never heard from that law firm again. They had fired a cannonball, and it had bounced harmlessly off the walls of my legal fortress. But the most significant power shift wasn't happening between me and Sharon. It was happening inside Maya. With every passing day, she stood a little taller. The money was part of it, of course. The security it offered was transformative. But it was more than that. It was the validation. It was the knowledge that someone had seen her, truly seen her, all along. She and I became a team. We met with the tenants of the two properties, two lovely families who were thrilled to meet the young woman who was now their landlady. Maya was nervous at first, but she handled herself with a quiet grace that was far more impressive than her mother's loud confidence. We opened a business bank account in her name. I watched as she endorsed the first rent checks and handed them to the teller, a look of profound, dawning empowerment on her face. One evening she came over for dinner. She was buzzing with an energy I had never seen in her before. "I did it, Grandpa," she said, her eyes shining. "Did what, sweetheart?" "I applied to the Rhode Island School of Design. Their illustration program. The one Mom said we could never afford." My heart swelled with a pride so fierce it almost hurt. "And what are you going to do when you get in?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "I'm going to go," she said, her voice full of a certainty that was brand new. "I'm going to use the rent money to pay my tuition and my living expenses. I can actually do it. It's real." She was no longer the invisible girl, sketching in the corner to stay out of the way. She was a young woman with assets, with an income, with a plan. She was a property owner, a future art student, an independent person. Sharon had spent a lifetime trying to snuff out her light, and in one afternoon I had handed her a book of matches and a gallon of fuel. The power hadn't just shifted, it had undergone a total glorious revolution. The final confrontation was inevitable. After their legal threats evaporated and their attempts at public shaming backfired, Sharon and Frank were left with nothing but their own desperation. They called and demanded a meeting. Not begged, not asked. Demanded. I agreed, but on my terms. My house, my workshop, my ground. They arrived one evening just as the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the floor of my workshop. The air was thick with the familiar, comforting smell of cedar and linseed oil. I was standing at my workbench, sharpening a plane blade on a whetstone, the rhythmic sh-chack sound, the only noise in the room. I didn't turn around when they walked in. I let them stand there for a moment, in my space surrounded by the evidence of my life's work. Sharon, predictably, broke the silence. "Dad, this has gone on long enough." Her voice tried for authoritative, but there was a tremor of panic underneath it. I finished a final pass on the blade, wiped it clean with an oiled rag, and set it down carefully. Only then did I turn to face them. I leaned back against the workbench, my arms crossed. I agree. Frank, her husband, who I rarely spoke to, decided to play the reasonable man. Edgar, he began, stepping forward. We understand you're upset, but you have to see this from our perspective. You've pulled the rug out from under us. We can't afford the house without your help. You've given Maya a massive financial asset that she has no idea how to manage. It's irresponsible. Irresponsible. I repeated the word slowly, letting it hang in the air. You think giving your daughter the means to build her own future is irresponsible. I think letting your son believe the world owes him a living, while your daughter believes she owes the world an apology for existing, is irresponsible. But we seem to have different definitions. Sharon's face flushed with anger. This isn't about Leo, this is about you punishing me. You've always resented my happiness, ever since Mom died. You're a bitter, lonely old man, and you're trying to make us all as miserable as you are. It was a textbook accusation, designed to wound. A year ago it would have. But I wasn't that man anymore. You're wrong, Sharon, I said, my voice calm and even. It unnerved her more than shouting ever could. I'm not lonely. I have a wonderful growing relationship with my granddaughter. A real one, based on mutual respect, not financial obligation. And I'm not bitter. I'm just done. I'm done pretending. I'm done keeping the peace at the expense of a child's spirit. I looked from her to Frank. For 20 years, this family has operated on a lie. The lie that Leo's needs were paramount and Maya's were irrelevant. The lie that your lifestyle was sustained by your own merits and not by my quiet subsidy. The lie that my role was to be a silent, open wallet. I didn't destroy this family, Sharon. I just stopped funding the illusion. Leo, who I hadn't realized was with them, had been lingering in the doorway. He stepped in now, his face a mixture of confusion and hurt. "Grandpa, why do you hate us?" The question was so childish, so simplistic, it almost broke my heart. "I don't hate you, Leo," I said, and my voice softened. "I have never ever hated you. But my love for you does not give your mother the right to erase your sister. The world has been handed to you on a silver platter your entire life. I have just given Maya the platter. What she does with it is up to her. What you do now, without all the advantages you took for granted, is up to you. Perhaps this is the greatest gift I could have given you, a dose of reality." Sharon let out a choked, incredulous laugh. "A gift? You're bankrupting us, and you call it a gift? We'll lose the house, then you'll lose the house," I said, my voice flat. "And you'll have to get a smaller one. And you might have to give up the country club. And Frank might have to get a second job. It's what normal people do when they live beyond their means. It's called consequences." That was it, the final unforgivable truth. Sharon's composure shattered. "You will regret this," she seethed, her fingers shaking as she pointed it at me. "You will die a lonely, miserable old man, and it will be your own damn fault." I held her gaze, my own expression unreadable. "I would rather be lonely in a world of truth, Sharon, than surrounded by a family built on lies. My wife made me a promise. She asked me to look after Maya. For 10 years I failed her. I will not fail her anymore." I turned my back on them then, a final deliberate act of dismissal. I picked up my newly sharpened plane and a fresh piece of cherry wood. The conversation was over. I heard Sharon make a sound of pure, impotent rage. Then the sound of their footsteps retreating, of a car door slamming, and the roar of an engine fading into the night. And I was alone in my workshop. But I wasn't lonely. The air was clear. The scales were balanced, and the quiet, rhythmic sound of the plane shaving away the first curl of wood from the block was the sound of peace. The sound of a promise, finally and truly kept. It's been a year since that night. The quiet in my life is different now. It's not the heavy, oppressive silence of things left unsaid. It's a peaceful, chosen quiet. The phone doesn't ring with demands or accusations. The mail doesn't bring threatening letters from lawyers. The ghosts of resentment have been exorcised. My relationship with Maya has blossomed into the greatest joy of my later years. She got into Rutset, of course. She's thriving. She calls me twice a week, not out of obligation, but to share her triumphs and frustrations. She sends me pictures of her art projects, and I can see her confidence growing with every brushstroke. She's managing the properties with the help of an accountant I found for her, and she's learning about taxes and leases and escrow. She's building a life, not just an art portfolio. Last month she used some of the income to take me out to a fancy dinner. My treat, Grandpa, she'd said, her smile so full of genuine happiness it nearly brought tears to my eyes. We didn't talk about her mother. We didn't need to. We talked about her future. Her clock sits in the corner of her small apartment in Providence, its steady, gentle ticking a constant reminder of where she came from and how far she's gone. My clock, its identical twin, sits in my living room. Sometimes I just sit and watch the pendulum swing, a hypnotizing arc of time and consequence. As for Sharon and Leo, their story is more complicated. They did lose the house. They couldn't sustain the mortgage and the taxes without my help. It was a messy, humiliating ordeal for them, I'm sure. They moved into a much smaller rental townhouse on the other side of the county. I heard through my cousin Beatrice that Frank had to take on a night job, and Sharon is working as a receptionist, a blow to her carefully crafted image as a lady of leisure. The country club membership is long gone. I have not spoken to Sharon since that night in my workshop. The line is open. She knows my number. But any conversation would have to begin with an apology, not to me, but to her daughter. And I'm not sure she has that in her. But there was a glimmer of hope from an unexpected source. About 2 months ago, I got a call from an unknown number. It was Leo. His voice was different. The easy confidence was gone, replaced by a hesitant uncertainty. "Grandpa," he said. "It's Leo." "I know," I said. He was quiet for a moment. I wanted to say I get it now. I think." He took a shaky breath. "Living here in this small place, watching Mom and Dad struggle, seeing how hard it is. And I talked to Maya. She told me about the art camp. About a lot of things. I was an idiot, Grandpa. I never saw it. I'm sorry. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was a start. It was the first crack in a lifetime of entitled blindness. Thank you for that, Leo," I said, and I meant it. That means a lot. We talked for a little while longer. He's working at a local hardware store. He's taking a couple of classes at the community college. He's learning what it means to stand on his own 2 feet. Maybe there's hope for him yet. So, here I am, in my 77th year, in a world that is both smaller and infinitely larger than it was before. And I find myself thinking about the nature of justice and family. For years, I believed that keeping the peace was the highest virtue. I told myself that I was being the big person by observing the unfairness, by quietly patching the holes in a sinking ship. But I was wrong. Silence in the face of injustice isn't peace, it's complicity. It's a fertilizer for resentment and pain. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is to hold up a mirror and force them to see their own reflection, warts and all. It wasn't about the money. It was never about the money or the properties. It wasn't even truly about revenge. It was about validation. It was about looking at a quiet, brilliant, worthy human being who had been told her whole life that she was invisible, and saying loudly and clearly for the whole world to hear, "I see you. You matter. Your light is not a flicker. It's a fire." Now I turn it over to you. Was I a bitter old man exacting a cruel revenge? Or was I a grandfather finally keeping a promise and delivering a long overdue justice? I've learned that these situations are never as simple as they seem. I'm truly interested to read what you think in the comments below. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Your stories and your perspectives matter, and they help all of us feel a little less alone. Thank you for listening to my story, and please don't forget to like and subscribe so we can keep sharing and learning together.